We're back with another episode of Boots, Balls and Bras with myself, Fara Williams, and the amazing Anita Asante. Neat, thanks for joining me in your busy international schedule. You're out, where are you, in the UK or are you out of the country with the 23s?
Out of the country right now, Faz, in Norway.
Oh, I bet it's cold
And
there.
you know what? I've got all my thermals on like a granny.
Mate, I'd be exactly the same. So, well, you got a busy week ahead, couple games. What is it?
Yeah, I got 2 games. So we play Norway tomorrow, and then we play Sweden back in the UK. We'll be playing in Doncaster, Keep Moat. So that'll be 2 really good fixtures for this age group in the new league format that we have, or the new Nations League style format. So plenty for the players to play for, and lots of good training.
Cool. It sounds better than what I've been up to. I've just been painting my outhouse, which is driving me insane. I've probably got paint all over me, but we're going to touch on international. We've got a huge game coming up for the Lionesses at Wembley on Friday night. So yeah, the last 2 fixtures England had were Germany defeated Wembley, a little bit disappointing, and also the fans. It was a half full stadium, which a little bit disappointing. The numbers have dropped, and then a not too convincing win against South Africa 2-1. But my question was, where do you think this Lioness team is at the minute?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, Farah. I think after the disappointment of not qualifying for the Olympics, some would have said, there was a lot of kind of tired and fatigued players potentially, and that break would do them good. But I think in terms of the momentum and performances, we haven't kind of seen the highs of since the Euros, I guess, that we've seen previously with the Lionesses in terms of performances. I think there's a little bit of transition going in, within the squad as well, to try and, get some younger players in the team and get them more exposure and experience, and obviously more caps going into next summer. So I think there's a bit more added competition in certain positions, not all over the park. But it's also a window of opportunity for, Sarina and her team to start looking at other players and how maybe they can sort of keep elevating the team.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's how I've been looking at this Lioness team. I think since obviously the World Cup final, and then obviously the disappointment of not qualifying for the Olympics, I thought, you know what, it was one of those where disappointment, but actually for the players, I felt like it was needed. They needed that break, as you mentioned. I think, mental fatigue more than anything. But we seem to have come back, and I don't know, is it a transition? I look at our squad and I look at, is it a competitive squad? Are there players, really fighting for their positions in the squad at the minute? And I would say no, looking from an outside in. When I look at the positions, I think the only real competition would be goalkeeper. I think Mary Earps and Hannah Hampton, I think that bit of competition, I think that's definitely there, something that Sarina's looking at. And then I would argue the only real competition other than that is probably the centre-halves with Millie Bright, obviously Alex Greenwood, Leah Williamson, and potentially Jess Carter. If they look to play a centre-half, there's competition, real competition there. And then I would probably say in that second number 10 position, I would say Kira's probably nailed down, and Georgia Stanway. And then you've got that other space in that 10. You've got Grace Clinton, Jess Park, who's playing really well. Obviously, Frank Kirby, an experienced player in there. Ella Toon, injured at the minute, but somebody that can play there. And then we've seen they've brought a few kids in. But other than that, I wouldn't look at the squad across the 11 and sense there's that much danger or competition for what we would see as the regular starters. I mean, I don't know what your opinion is of that, but I mean, maybe the right-hand side, I think maybe the right-hand side, thinking about it now, maybe Beth Mead, Chloe Kelly, Lauren James, if she's back fit. I don't know, but I don't really see that much competition for players in positions. I don't know what your feeling is on that.
Yeah, I think, like you mentioned, defensively, there's a lot of competition, especially centre-back positions. Maybe full-back, wing-back positions were a little bit light, potentially, in terms of, Lucy Bronze is a really experienced player. We know what she offers, but with Niamh Charles injured as well, we might be lacking slight depth there, and left-sided as well. Rachel Daly retired from international football. was quite versatile, could play in multiple positions.
Mm.
We know Jess Carter can play there as well. But they're all different kind of profile players as well. It depends on kind of how you want to utilize those fullback roles and wing-back roles, and be more offensive or more defensive. Up front in the front three or wide forwards, we probably got some depth there. But I think also, maybe off the back of some defeats, like the Germany game at Wembley, and not having that kind of rhythm, momentum, bit of confidence, can affect the squad a little bit. Like they're going into a very big game as well, so that's going to be interesting to see. What did we learn from the Germany game, and how can we take those learnings into this USA game?
Yeah.
And also to see what Sarina, in terms of how she's going to line up the team. What are the best relationships on the team? No Lauren James. We know what she can do when she's available as well in that number 10 role. So, I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting. I mean, football, like I said, as we know as former players, it's about form as well, and if you have multiple players that are in form, it can be great. If they're not, obviously it can have a detrimental effect. But yeah, this is it's a big test as well for them. But again, USA haven't brought all of their players either. They look like they're trying to bleed in some younger faces into their squad as well.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point in terms of, form of players. And I think Gabby George, I think when I look at that call up for her, I think in terms of her performances this year, Millie Turner, I think given their consistency of good level of performance, I think they deserve to be called into the squad. But then I look at other areas of the team or the squad that's been selected, and I would argue if players aren't playing, should they be selected? There's young players within the squad. Are you just giving them experience to be amongst the squad? Are they going to get minutes over other players that potentially should be in there? I'm still blown away by the fact that Nikita Paris hasn't been selected in the squad, the form that she's in at Brighton, playing regularly, still only 30 years of age, hasn't been picked since the Euros, a very experienced player, as I say, you know what you're going to get with her. That's a bit of a surprise in terms of that form. There's players in the squad that I would argue aren't playing that well, but are being selected. So it's a difficult one. I think with the kids being there, my question would be, are they going to play? Are they going to give them exposure, or are they just going to get them to come and make up numbers and get that experience from the squad? Because after these games, we've got Nation League games that, then becomes competitive games that have a meaning behind it. So we've got 2 friendlies now. I wouldn't say there's no meaning, because obviously you want to build that kind of momentum going into the Nations League fixtures and obviously into the Euros next summer. But out of the games they've got coming up, these are probably the couple of games that they can, allow for these young players to have an opportunity to play. Would you agree, or do you think they're there to make up numbers? How do you kind of see them being utilised within the squad?
No, no. I think you're spot on in terms of the additions. The ones you mentioned have deserved their call ups. We know Nikita's been in firing form, and hopefully Sarina's keeping a watchful eye on how she continues throughout the season, and her fortunes could change. We just don't know. But in terms of the younger players, and obviously some of them have come through our program, the 23s, which for us is obviously always a great thing to see. But it's about them being able to prove that they can display their qualities and build relationships within that squad and compete with some of the top players in the world at this level. I think they're there because they've merited from their performances over the 23s program, but also for their clubs, the opportunity to go in there and showcase what they can do. And hopefully they get the opportunity to actually play, because that's how we'll really be able to assess if fundamentally they have a really good shot of potentially making the squad for the summer next year. Sometimes I think it's also about having different types of profiles in the squad that offer maybe something slightly different. And we know that club relationships can help. If you
Mhm.
play with certain players at club, you can sort of build that into your international team and squad. But yeah, I think I mean, we've seen what Grace Clinton has been able to do since she's
Mhm.
come into the senior setup.
Yeah.
And she's been able to show that consistency across club as well. But with all the players, getting selected for one squad does not mean you're guaranteed selection for the Euros,
Mm.
right? It doesn't mean you're guaranteed selection for the upcoming squad. So there's a lot riding at stake for all the players, whether they're what we consider shoe-ins and ones that are challenging as
Mm.
well. But for the ones that do get the minutes and the opportunity, that's exactly what it is. Go out there. They got to go be brave and really showcase and make Sarina and Iron's job difficult.
Yeah. No, no,
Essentially.
no, I completely look, I completely understand that. Obviously, look, we've been internationals for many years, and we kind of understand. And obviously, I did the 23s for a couple of years. You've currently been doing it for 18 months now. So
Yeah.
we know how it works. We're not naive to how it works. But I do question some of the times around how they do things. I look at the youth program, and I say, okay, that we use Missy Bo Kearns as a really good example of it. She had, certainly when in my time of 23, she was very consistent in terms of what she did. Performance levels were really high with the 23s. I would then argue that she went back to her club and performance levels were very inconsistent at Liverpool at the time when I was there. I mean, she's still in the 23s now, and I feel like she still has that same problem at Aston Villa, away from the 23s. Does really well at 23s when you read reports, and then at Aston Villa. But she was in the seniors and has now been left out, right? And I'm imagining that's based on club performances. Now you've got players moving from 23s to seniors, having not played WSL football for their team. So I question sometimes how the system and what they're looking for. Like, do you have to be playing regularly in WSL? Is it a 23 program that they're looking into to bring you through? Are the players that ahead, but because they're not getting minutes, a little bit held behind? Is it Blinkella Brown
Yeah.
is an example of that? She's probably ahead of Missy Bowe in terms of her ability, but she's actually not playing because she left Villa
Hmm.
and chose to go to Manchester City. Now, is that held her back a little bit? It's the same with Ruby Mace. She was well advanced at Birmingham, goes to Manchester City for a few years, and in terms of that development, and I feel like you get most of your development in game at that age, kind of lost that at Manchester City, and now is trying to rebuild that with Leicester. But I feel like those two have just kind of jumped past the likes of Missy Bowe, who was in the squad for a period of time. And even when you look at, Katie Robinson, for example, a player that went to the Euros when they won in 2022,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden has never been seen again in the senior squad. And then you have a Jess Naz that's overtook her. And it's just, I kind of question what it is they're looking for outside of the 23. Do they look at the 23s and go, actually, they perform with 23, so we can pick them based off that? Or do they have to be playing well for their club? Because some of them don't play well for their club and some of them
Yeah.
don't even play any minutes.
It's a combination of things, Farah. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
multifaceted. I think the senior England staff look at consistency under the 23s,
Mm-hmm.
the development in general, on and off the pitch, the behaviors, does it fit into the culture of what they want at senior level? But they also look at club and, are they adapting? Are they getting enough exposure and minutes on the pitch? I think there's a multitude of things and metrics that they look at, and there will be, players that probably aren't even involved that they still keep tabs on,
Mm.
and they continue to watch how they're developing and how they're improving, and also what they can learn from that. But it's difficult because I can't speak for Sarina and Ian and their kind of
Mm-hmm.
methodology. But what I can say is, obviously, if players come through the pathway, there is um, a good or fundamental understanding of the England way of playing,
Mm.
if that makes sense,
Yeah,
that
yeah, for
some
sure.
players won't have at their clubs in
Mm-hmm.
terms of, the in and out of possession philosophies or principles, the general culture around analysis or training, players they've grown up playing with through the pathways, as we were very fortunate to do,
Yeah.
coming through the 17s and 19s and 21s. And sometimes that continuity, I think, helps them form I guess, a bigger picture or a general picture of those individuals. But it's also about potential. Who do you think has lots of room to fulfill that potential? And also sometimes the position specific stuff comes into play. What do we really need in this moment of time, in terms of positions? But I think, now being on the other side of it as a coach, I understand how difficult the role is, and I don't envy the decisions they make, because at the end of the day, they have been to two major tournaments with this squad, got to a final and semi-final, and now we are dissecting, aren't we, every detail as spectators when
No,
things are
I get that,
going
Neat, but
right.
I think I would argue since that tournament, this national, like our national team, hasn't performed at the levels, and even throughout that World Cup, if we're honest and we assess and we look and dissect, even the performances in the World Cup weren't to the level that we expected. They had some lucky escapes in terms of their pathway to the World Cup final. And then obviously it was inevitable that they were going to, come up against top opposition in the final, and the result kind of go the way it did. I would argue since then they haven't had the performances. I know we lost a couple of the spine in terms of the experience, but from an outsider looking in, when I look at that squad, and look, we've been in squads of 18. We didn't have the luxury, of 23 player squads until later on in our career, when it was really cutthroat and you had to keep the competition competitive. I'd argue sometimes we take big numbers, with England, 24, 26 player squads, that in my opinion aren't competitive enough to push the players that have been there for a while, that kind of need that little bit of competitiveness, competition within the team. I would argue that maybe a smaller squad, a more competitive squad in the short term would be better. I understand the reasoning. They need players to make up numbers. We understand they have to play 11v11 and kind of get, as you mentioned there, the attacking in possession, out of possession kind of game plans done. But I really do question whether, and it's not just the young player. I'm not saying it's the young players. I'm arguing also that there's some players that aren't in form and that aren't keeping it competitive. But I would argue, have we had a dip in our performances because our actual environment isn't competitive enough? And I'm talking on the training pitch. I wouldn't say they haven't got the mentality in terms. I'm not saying that they haven't got the mentality to be competitive, but I'm saying having that is one thing. Being able to execute it on pitch is something else. So you could have the best mentality, competitiveness in the gym and whatever, in your fitness. But when it comes to executing on the pitch, we know it's completely different. And I don't feel this squad is competitive enough, or have got enough players for it to be. I'm sure they're competitive people, is what I'm trying to get at. Of course
Absolutely.
they are, but I don't feel the competition is competitive enough to really kick us on. When I look at other nations, I can imagine looking at their training sessions and it being real competitive. I could be wrong. That's just from me outside looking in and kind of trying to understand why our performances haven't been at the level that we expect, having won the Euros the way that they did.
Yeah, I think all we can do, obviously, all we can is analyze what we see, what we're seeing, right, in terms of performances and on the pitch. And I don't think any of us can deny there has been a dip in the performance level of the Lionesses. I think they themselves would be self-reflective enough to go, you know what, we've had a dip, and there's certain areas of the pitch and within the game, phases of play, that they'll be working on and looking at to try and redress and improve on, for next summer. In terms of training and the level of competitiveness every day, I think staff, coaches, all of that try and drive it. But as we know, the modern game especially, but even in general, requires the mentality of players to drive it, right? To bring the standards on the pitch, every day, to training. And if that isn't happening, then obviously question marks have to be asked, and they need to think about, are we picking, number one, the right players to help us move into the next kind of phase of their journey in terms of the next big competition. But yeah, I mean, like I guess it's a massive challenge because, like you said, we've played in smaller squads, so you had to fight for that shirt, and for that opportunity to get on the pitch, to get in the squad.
Exactly.
There's a lot at stake, in terms of that. I don't think we can negate the fact that some individuals have had some difficult times at club level, managerial changes, transition, not being in form, a lot more scrutiny than they've ever been under. We've never been under this kind of microscope in the same way. Do you know what I mean? I never had to flick onto Twitter or Instagram to see people going, the team's not performing, we're not doing X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
I just asked my dad. do you know what I mean?
I mean, we only really got that in competition, didn't we? So yeah, I get it day to day. They're probably getting it, or week to week, should I say, with the games. I get that. Nate, let me ask you something.
And there's a level of trust, Farah. I'm going to be honest. I think coaches, you build relationships with players, and there's a level of trust you have with those players, even when they're probably not 100% at their best.
100%.
There's a certain level of like credit in the bank, I suppose, and they're banking on.
Look, we were those
finding
players.
a way.
I agree. We were those players. There were times where I wasn't in the best of form, and I'd start games for England, or I'd still be selected within squads, even tournaments. So I understand it, and I understand there's players within that squad that have a know-how. My question is like, obviously it's difficult for a coach, right? But you've got players that have a know-how of playing international football, that are in form, that are still young, in my opinion, or of a good age, and don't get picked. And then, so my question is, right, as a coach, when and why do you think coaches all of a sudden transition some players at some ages other than up? So I use Nikita as an example, right?
Yeah.
28 when she won 28 in the Euros 2022, right? Not been picked since then. Okay, we could argue in terms of her time at Manchester United, was in and out of the squad, but actually started a good run of games last season for them and was doing well. Still didn't get picked, right? Was good enough to be a part of that 22 squad because of what attributes she has, but is now not good enough because the attributes she has, they're not looking at anymore, right? Okay, cool, whatever. Then we look at Lucy Bond's 33, experience, the most decorated international footballer. And from an outsider looking in, it's like we're already looking to try and replace her rather than giving her the confidence to go, actually, we've got a tournament next summer and you still are our number one right back, right? I feel like we get to an age where we start to kind of push them. Frank Kirby, for example, yes, she didn't play for Chelsea, back in form now at Brighton. Are we going to give her the confidence to feel like she still adds value to that team? Probably not, because these players are now plus 30. But my argument is, and what I want to know from a coach's point of view, what is it that you think that is the right time, I guess, to bring kids in and kind of change that transition over when they're still performing? And when does age come into it? I'm beating around the bush, but when does age come into it? Because
no, I mean, you're asking a very
like that, and it's frustrating as a fan because you just want the best, regardless of age, playing at that time.
Look, Faz, you're asking a very valid question. And when is the right time to transition younger players into squads? I don't think there's any kind of gold standard timeline, right? Because you could see players, if they were exceptional at 17 and they're ready to play senior football, you'd probably give them the opportunity because they're not getting stretched.
When you're young. I think it's
stretched in their environment.
Yeah, I think it's different when you're younger. I'm saying, I feel like, when you hit that 30, and you'll know it as a player, you start to have those question marks over you. Do you know what I mean? As in,
okay, yeah. So you're essentially asking me, is there ageism in football? And my answer would be 100% yes. I've been on the end of it. I've experienced it firsthand. So I know there is. And I don't think we can, I think there's a lot of data now to support what players can and can't do if we're looking just at physical elements of the game, right? But if you're looking at on the eye, what are they doing? Are they able to still replicate what we've seen? Then for some players, there will be a question mark over some attributes related to game plan, specific things that you want. If you want to play a high pressing game and your player can no longer really do that, sustain it for whatever, 70, 80 minutes, then you might question that. But in terms of game intelligence, IQ, relationship, commitment, I think, I feel like I was probably my best in my late 20s, early 30s, because I had a better understanding of my body. I felt that I understood the game better in terms of making better decisions. That stopped me being wasteful in terms of energy expended, by just positioning myself in the right place quicker and things like that, that you adjust and you adapt your game, right?
For sure.
So I agree with you in that. It really is about, you're saying, as the management, saying to these players, you are still valuable regardless of, your age and where you are now, right? And
Because I feel like that
ultimately,
conversation isn't had. I feel like it's easy
yeah,
to tell a younger player to be patient and blah, 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 you'll get your time and whatever. But I feel like it's really difficult, or coaches find it really difficult to say to a senior player, you know what, I know you're getting on, I know, blah, 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 and kind of have that open conversation around age, around where you see them at in the squad. And
yeah.
obviously we're not naive, we're not stupid. We know at some point we're going to be replaced. But I think if you're performing at a high level, that shouldn't even come into question.
Well, absolutely. And I think, like, you hit the nail on the head. It's putting the question to them, right? Because
Yeah.
you, the player, probably have the best understanding of how much longer can I go? How do I feel? In terms of mentally, physically, am I still as driven? Am I still as motivated? Do I feel that I can give more or the same to this team? And then it's a discussion that you can have mutually as a coach manager with those players, and you build out a plan and say, look, this is where I see you right now. They may agree, they may disagree, but it's an honest conversation, right?
Yeah.
And then you're saying, well, this is how you actually can impact this squad right now or in the next cycle. But beyond that cycle, I don't really see you continuing. Maybe that's a conversation you have. And it may be really challenging, right? I don't think it's wouldn't be unfair to say for a player, it's always going to be challenging to hear certain things if your mindset is not there. But ultimately, there has to be a window of time that managers start to phase in younger players. They need caps. They need exposure to that level. They need to test themselves against players within their own squad, but of course opposition. So they're prepared for the next 4 years or the next 2 years of the next competition, right? But equally, if there are players that still have value to add because of the experience, regardless of age, they're still demonstrating form and ability and competence. And of course, they should be in the conversation, and they should definitely have the opportunity potentially to be in the squad. That's how I look at it anyway.
Yeah.
Because when I hit my 30s and plus 30s, I'm sure everyone was, coaches, managers looking around going, well, we're looking to the future now. We're going to start bleeding in new players. You're on the bench, that suddenly, and that's a whole new transition for you. How do I adapt to this role in the team? Getting written off. I actually got pulled into a meeting once being told, oh, when I was a player, I had a manager, just one of the assistant coaches, I had a manager tell me I'm only going to play 5 games in a season. So I was like, all right then, literally that was a conversation I had with a coach, assistant coach. So he was trying to tee me up to kind of be like, just to let you know, you might only play 3 or 4 games this season. We're bringing in a new player. Ended up playing every game bar one the whole season.
Yeah.
And part of it kind of, amped me up, got
Yeah.
me really annoyed. And I was like, no, I'm not having this. Like, I'm not having you to say that you're basically telling me I'm old and I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
Of
Prove
course,
them.
it comes to us all, but I'm not going to, it's hard to hear, like I said, but it also, what you're competent at, what you can do. It came to a point where I knew my Achilles, I can't do it anymore. Fair
Yeah.
enough. But
Yeah.
let's have an honest conversation.
That's true. We've had a real good rant about whether we're competitive enough at the minute and how good the squad is. But there are some exciting young players within that squad. I would definitely agree that definitely are. Whether they're ready yet or not, who's to know? As you say, they need a bit of exposure. I hope in these 2 friendlies and certainly on Saturday at Wembley they get the opportunity. But we talk Saturday. Emma Hayes returning to England with the US national team. Did you see Neat? She was in Camden pub pouring the pints. What was it, yesterday or the day before?
Yeah.
What she actually said within an interview, she says she feels like she's got her mojo back after she left Chelsea feeling unwell. She had a 12-year stint there, didn't she? But you're a coach. So how much pressure is that to kind of, was she under and have continued to be under to kind of get to that stage where it was too much and she obviously needed that little bit of a release, and now she feels like she's got as she says in her own words, her mojo back.
Can I just say, I saw them pictures and I just knew Emma Hayes was in her element. Like Camden Town is where she grew up.
Yeah,
It's a hunting ground. Like she was loving it, and
right at home.
being at home we all know that feeling. Just being at home, being acknowledged as well for all the amazing things she's done for Chelsea, and her family got to enjoy that. But 12 years in the kind of role that she had is no mean feat. We see turnover of managers across men's and women's football quite regularly now.
Yeah.
So to have that staying power really speaks volumes, I think, to her endurance
Yeah.
and ability to just keep going season upon season, trying to evolve Chelsea Football Club in terms of its standards, the resources, the facilities, the recruitment methods, the game itself on the pitch. That takes a lot of energy. And having coached as well, it doesn't end from just the training pitch to the match day. You are prepping for training every single day. You're managing players, sometimes 20, 30 players in your squad and staff. And Chelsea have 20 odd staff. So she's managing huge numbers, as she has across 12 years. To do that, sustain that, have the energy, have everybody's input. I don't know how she does it.
Yeah,
I
and
was
she never
exhausted.
shows signs of kind of fading either, and that's why I think the comments are a bit surprising. As I say, you never looked at her in her reign and think she looks tired, she looks worn out, she looks like she's done here. Even right till the end, I never felt like she was done at Chelsea. And I mean, I guess that's credit to her as a coach in terms of how she goes about her work and kind of keeps what she needs to keep close to her. And what she doesn't, she kind of lets out. But I'm really looking
And she
forward
went
to
through a
it.
lot, Sarah,
Yeah,
didn't she? And she
yeah,
went
she
through
did.
a lot,
Yeah, she did. She did. She was obviously unwell for a period of time, operation, and kind of was out. Yeah, she had a lot going on. But as I say, remained professional. But I mean, let me just ask you, how excited are you to see? And look, we know both squads are a little bit weakened, but how excited are you to see Sarina Wiegman come up against Emma Hayes tactically, on the side, like all of that? Because I'm super excited just to kind of see, like, how it goes down, who's been doing what, or, on a training pitch. Is something going to be different? Does Emma Hayes know Sarina Wiegman's tactics? Because, they rarely change. Is she able to kind of counter that? I'm just like so intrigued by it.
I can tell how excited and intrigued by it you are, Faz, because you're grinning and your shoulders are
I know,
going,
like,
You're like...
I'm so intrigued to see how. I mean, look, they haven't got full squads. We know that, so it's not going to be, England's what we would say starting 11 going into the Euros, and it certainly, isn't the team that won the Olympics. But I mean, for the coaches, I think that kind of the powerhouses in terms of female coaches. I'm just excited.
They're both change makers, aren't they? Do you know what I mean? In women's football, when you think about it, they're two juggernauts going head to head. Emma's already in her first stint as an international manager, won an Olympics, which is like mind blowing. But I think, it's going to be a really good test for both teams to see, I guess, more so where the rest of their squad is. Because like we're saying, we don't think they're the two strongest 11s necessarily will be out, put out as such. There'll be a lot of trial and error and see kind of what the relationships are. But tactically as well, to see kind of what style Emma Hayes is implementing into this US team and the identity, I think is going to be a nice sneak peek to see how they're building up as well. But also for us, in terms of the Lionesses, what lessons, like I said, have we learnt from Germany? Because, they're a strong nation too, with similar profile players in terms of fast, kind of direct forward players, and how we can manage those things. Because I think one of the big lessons or things I sort of analysed from the World Cup is we weren't the best at stopping counterattacks.
Yeah, we were dreadful.
Those transitional teams and those teams that sometimes are a bit direct or a bit off the cuff. And I don't think necessarily USA will be off the cuff, but I think they will be definitely very dynamic and very like have that explosive speed going forward in transition moments. So whether enough will be good enough to stop them from source, stop them from playing and getting into their most threatening players, will definitely be interesting. But obviously we've played USA before in the past at Wembley, and that was a very, very close game. So I would like to see an exciting game. Would like to see some goals.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. So that kind of leads me then into our questions that we've had. We've had a few questions sent in. Samantha04 said, what would your Lioness starting 11 be based on the current form and injury? So this current squad that's selected, what would your starting 11? I mean, I already have mine. But I don't know if you want to go first or...
You already have... From the squad. Okay, the current starting 11. I'd probably go Hannah Hampton in goal. Alex Greenwood, centre back, alongside Millie Bright. Lucy Bronze, right back, and I'd give Gabby George a chance at left back.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, because I like Alex in the middle. I was just thinking.
No. I mean, I'm with you on that. I would have just probably put Jess Carter left back ahead of. So that I would have put Mary Earps ahead of Hannah Hampton, and I would have put Jess Carter ahead of Gabby George. But I think only because she's played in the league, but I think it'll be good exposure for Gabby. She's 26, 27 now, isn't she?
Yeah,
it'll be good exposure for her. So I get it for that reason.
Yeah, and the only reason I'd pick Hannah over Mary is just because I think if we are stretched or under the cosh, I think she can stretch the game with her range, like distribution wise, if we needed to. In the middle, I'd probably go Kira, Georgia, and probably Grace Clinton. Oh, it's actually quite tough, to be honest. I think I'd go less in the 9. And then I'd probably go... I want to see Aggie Beaver Jones.
Okay.
I just want to see what she can do. So I'd probably put her on the right, because that's where she plays predominantly for Chelsea. And then on the left, potentially... I'd probably go Chloe Kelly on the left, so she can cut in on her right foot, her stronger foot, come inside.
Yeah, I mean, good choice. I mean, if I was picking a team that I thought would be the most competitive, I would play Beth Mead on the right and Chloe Kelly on the left. I actually think it's an opportunity for players to get exposure against one of the top nations. And so I think it would be ideal to give the likes of maybe Jess Naz a run out on the left. We saw her against South Africa. Had a good performance. But I think the next level would be, the likes of Germany, the likes of USA. So I think Jess Naz could be a potential starter on the left. And as you say, if they really do want to give opportunity, maybe Aggie Beaver on the right-hand side. They've got stability and experience behind them to kind of give them that exposure. So, that would probably be the team that I would go with. Another question, Megan.E. Chavez, there we are. Prediction for the England-USA game?
Prediction?
Oof. I'm going to go 3-1 USA.
3-1 USA?
Yeah.
I'm going to go 2-1 Lionesses. I'm going to go 2-1 Lionesses because they're at Wembley. Yeah. And I feel like hopefully the home crowd gives them the extra.
I mean, this USA team isn't even as strong as... And then it's Lily SSS 11, Coven Dream, 5-a-side England and USA team.
Sweating. That's tough,
Yeah.
Out of this squad? Or just even the players that aren't involved?
Currently, that's in the squads.
Alyssa Nair,
Anissa Nair,
Naomi Girma.
Naomi Girma, that's it. Then I'm going to go Haran. Then I'm going to go Rose Lavelle. And then I'm going to go Russo.
Woo! That's a spicy 5-a-side, not going to lie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd probably go similar. I'd go Alyssa Nair. I'd go Girma. I'd go Greenwood. I'd go...
Very defensive, Anita.
No, I was going to go Rose Lavelle. So what am I on? That's 4.
One more.
4. Need one more. I need a striker. And striker, I'm going to go... who am I going for? I'm going to go Aggie.
Okay.
Beaver Jones.
Love it. Love it. So that's our 5-a-side team. Neat. That is the end of our pod for this week. It was quite a long one, actually, just considering we was only speaking about England. But guys, thanks for listening to BBB. Remember to subscribe, like, and comment if you like, obviously, listening to what we have to say. But next week, there won't be a pod with myself and Anita, but we will have a Fara meet with a special guest, Lucy Bron. So keep your eyes open for that one.